Thanks for coming back to the second session of today, where we're focusing on soil and soil activities in this day 3 of the Water Soil Climate Workshop. Happy to see everyone here who's able to join us. Thanks for making the time. I know that this event brings us together in this online platform from many different places. I am personally joining from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of Comox First Nation on Vancouver Island, and am grateful and appreciative for the opportunity to live here and to have learned about the land we're working on and the soil of this specific place. And I would just encourage everyone to take a moment to think about the land where you are and the interaction you have with that land to date. I am so happy to be moderating today's panel discussion, Cover Cropping Support Programs and Tools Explained. My name is Raylani, and I am a research assistant with the Sustainable Agricultural Landscapes Lab at UBC, and I'm a personal fan of cover crops. So happy to hear what all of the panelists today have to share. Cover crops, just maybe a few sentences to get us all on the same page. I'm sure we all come with our own points of reference, but when we talk about cover crops, we're talking about non-cash crops, so crops that are grown not to be harvested, but for their other benefits, which can be many. We often think about nutrient cycling, maintaining soil cover, and keeping living roots in the ground. In the last session, Sean talked a little bit about soil health principles, and cover crops are one that touch on the majority of those principles and have some benefit to the soil when we think about it from a variety of different lenses. With us today, I am pleased to introduce our panelists who deliver support to farmers and through a variety of cover crop programs for producers across the province. And we have 4 folks joining us today. We have Dieter Giesing from the BC Ministry of Agriculture and Food, who will be speaking about new cover crop resources, including a resource guide of species fact sheets and future tools that the ministry is working on. And we have Alana Wilson from the Investment Agriculture Foundation, who will speak to the cover crop stream of the BC Climate Agri-Solutions Fund cost share program. And also April Steensby from Delta Farmland and Wildlife Trust, speaking about their cover crop stewardship program. And also Arzina Hamir, also from the Investment Agriculture Foundation, who will talk about the BC Living Lab activities on cover crop research and extension. So each of these panelists will give about a 5-minute presentation on their program, and then we'll have an opportunity for questions from the audience. Feel free to write your questions in the Q&A box as the presentations are ongoing. You also have the ability to upvote questions if you have the same question or if you see a question that you also would like answered. So let's get going. Thanks, Asha, for screen sharing here. I'm going to introduce first Dieter, who's going to kick things off. So Dieter is the soil management specialist for the BC Ministry of Agriculture and Food and the soils instructor for the agricultural department at the University of the Fraser Valley. Dieter has worked in and around soils in the organic waste industry in a variety of different positions for over 30 years. And has conducted a series of soils-related projects that have ranged from lab work to field work and from forest to urban soils. And from the design of growing mediums for the horticultural and landscape industry, as well as erosion and sediment plans for construction sites, to soil design and the implementation of water and fertility management plans in and outside of Canada. So coming at soil from such a variety of different perspectives. Welcome, Dieter. I'll let you take it from here.
Well, thank you, Elani, for this introduction. And before I get started, we're all dialing in from different areas. So I'm actually living, my family and I live and work and play and learn on the the Stolo First Nations territory. And I'm always awed about that they managed to have sustainable stewardship of our lands for thousands of years. And this is a source of inspiration for me with our modern climate and environmental aches. So perhaps let's dive into the presentation. So what is a cover crop decision tool? So we tried, we know that there's a lot of information, a lot of things going on in BC on cover cropping. There are private initiatives, but there are also research. We heard a lot of research going on with UBC and other academia. And but it is region-wise a little bit anecdotal, if you want, and it's not really totally coordinated. And we're trying now to consolidate this cover crop information and make it available to the broader agricultural industry. In the beginning, it was meant to be something like those Midwest cover crop decision tools, those online tools. At that point in time, we have to start. There is I'm one of the few ones, perhaps the only one who's working on that. So we have to kind of start with smaller steps. So at that point in time, we have consolidated it to fact sheets of on cover crops that have been vetted, that have been shown to work in BC. And actually, Relani has doing much of the heavy lifting in the beginning by compiling all those information that are relevant for BC. It's not at all the last iteration. We will probably develop that, and ultimately we would like to see it coming towards a really interactive tool that is a platform, some sort of wiki for cover crops. So how does it work? At this stage, we are really, it's almost imminent. I was hoping we have that ready for today already, but no, there is still some things we have to flatten out. But at this stage, there are 23 cover crop species fact sheets and the resource summary. So that helps a little bit to a quick finder on the right cover crop species, depending on your management goal and or operational goal, but also on environmental considerations. Ultimately, as I said, would like to have a platform that is geo-referenced and has all that information, and it's growing and it's interactive as knowledge comes in. Again, those fact sheets will be available in March. We are already on 29th, so we have 1 day. Actually, we got 1 day more free to work on that, but again, it didn't work, but I really expect it to come very, very soon. Next slide, please. So how can you get involved? If you're a farmer, we would love to hear. We have a dedicated email now, and if you have experience and you're open to share your experience to the extent you feel comfortable with, we would love to hear from you. What have you done? What were your obstacles? What are the trade-offs? What have you observed? How did it establish, and so on? And really get that information and collect it more systematically. And it goes basically to all producers in all regions. We know we have cover crops in row crops. We have that in orchards. We have it in vegetables. So there is a broad range of things, and that's exactly what we want, that later on farmers with their specific location and specific production system can get a first idea what experience is out there, so that they're not alone and can actually and helps them to find that right first step. As a partner or researcher, basically the same. I know there's much more going on. Maybe you have much more detailed associated or linked information, like how does it impact certain soil properties, and so we would like to learn that too. Again, as a repository of this information that in the end, everybody, whether you're a partner, whether you're a researcher or farmer or any consultant, can actually access and gives them an idea, oh, that has been done, that has worked, and that hasn't. So that is basically my little spiel here. It's the first time actually I introduced that that tool, those fact sheets. And yeah, and big thanks also going out to Relani, who really helped us to kick that off in the beginning. It's already some time ago, and we had another consultant actually on the way, Mike Witt. So thank you, and I think I'll give it back to Relani.
Great, thanks, Dieter. Up next, we have Alana, who is a program or a manager of programs with the Investment Agriculture Foundation. And she's a professional agrologist and received a Bachelor's of Science in Agrology from the Food and Resource Economics faculty at the University of British Columbia, and a Master's in Local Economic Development from the London School of Economics. Welcome, Alana.
Thanks, Faylani, and thank you for that intro. And I'm joining you today from the traditional territories of the Hupechis and Shasat First Nations in the Alberni Valley. So really glad to be with you today and on this panel and sharing some information about the BC Climate Agri-Solutions program delivered by Investment Agriculture Foundation. So the BCAF program provides funding to help farmers in adopting beneficial management practices that store carbon and reduce greenhouse gases in three specific areas. The first being nitrogen management, the second being cover cropping, and the third is rotational grazing. In terms of how the program works, producers are able to apply for funding to implement BMPs, and it's cost shared funding. The cost shared ratio is 70-30, so 70% of the eligible costs for approved projects would be covered by the BCAF program, and the remaining 30% would be covered by the applicant themselves. And there's also per category caps in the program. For nitrogen management, the cap's $30,000. For cover cropping, it's $30,000 per producer. For rotational grazing, it's $20,000. And the maximum program funding through BCAF is $75,000 per farm. So farmers are able to apply for funding through application intakes. And if approved for funding, they would have 4 months to purchase the materials and up to a year to complete the project. We haven't yet got information on 2024 intakes, but we do expect the program to reopen this year. And to stay up to date on upcoming application intakes, as they're announced, we recommend that producers sign up for the IAF newsletter. Next slide, thanks. So in terms of how you can get involved in this program, as a farmer, applications are accepted through the IAF client portal. You can register for the portal and register your information at any time. This will make sure your account's ready for when applications open for any of the funding programs. This program also supports knowledge transfer events like field days and workshops, as well as knowledge transfer materials and resources, which are available to farmers throughout the year. To learn more about these beneficial management practices, you can visit our website for events and resources. And in terms of becoming involved as a partner for the program, agrologist training events are hosted throughout the year. You can check our website for upcoming events, and there's actually a series of 3 workshops on cover cropping taking place at the end of March through the BC Institute of Agrologists that are being supported through this program. And as part of farmer engagement and knowledge transfer part of the program, IAF will be sharing a request for proposals for organizations interested in delivering farmer engagement and knowledge transfer activities in those 3 BMP areas. So to learn more about this or find out when we're having a request for proposals for those partnerships, you can sign up to receive RFPs directly in your inbox at iafbc.ca/RFP.
Great, thanks, Alana. Maybe if you have a second, you can share where folks can sign up for that newsletter in the chats. Next up, we have April Stainsby, who is a program coordinator with the Delta Farmland and Wildlife Trust. And she studied agriculture at UBC and the University of Manitoba and has worked on farms, agro-environmental research projects, and program coordination. And April will be assisting with the delivery of DF and WT stewardship programs and working with farmers in Metro Vancouver and Abbotsford.
Thanks so much, Rolani. Good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for having me on behalf of Delta Farmland and Wildlife Trust. So Delta Farmland and Wildlife Trust is a nonprofit based in Delta. We promote the preservation of farmland and wildlife habitat by partnering with farmers to implement stewardship practices that enhance soil and preserve wildlife habitat. So DFWT has been delivering cost share programs for farmers in Delta for the last 30 years. Our cost share programs support stewardship practices such as cover cropping, grassland set-asides, and hedgerow. And so next slide, today I'm going to talk about our cover crop stewardship program. So our cover crop program provides funding to farmers for growing cover crops that are planted in the summer or the fall following the harvest of the cash crop. The cover crops are grown for their ecological benefits for the purpose of improving the soil and supporting overwintering waterfowl. And so for this reason, they must be left to grow and not be harvested or grazed by livestock during the winter months. And the cover crop program is currently available to farmers in Metro Vancouver and Abbotsford. We hope to expand the program to the rest of the Fraser Valley this year. And if this happens, we will update our website and social media to let you know. So stay tuned. How does the program work? So the cover crop program, for the program, we pay a per acre rate, which varies depending on several factors. So our base rate is $50 or $60 per acre. But it varies a bit based on planting date, species mix, and region. So we encourage earlier seeding dates and using a multi-species mix. The cover crop program will open for applications in the summer. Please visit our website for more information and to apply. And the program is first come, first served. So I recommend applying early. And our website is deltafarmland.ca. And so how to get involved? So the cover crop program can apply to any farmers in the region who grow annual crops and are considering growing a winter cover crop. I encourage you again to check our website for more information on this and other programs that we offer and to apply for programs. And please reach out to us with any questions by email or phone. My contact info is on the screen there. And we're really happy to discuss our programs. As a partner or researcher, our programs are science-based and we conduct our own ongoing research and monitoring work to assess the effectiveness of the stewardship programs that we support. So we have technicians who monitor cover crop growth and waterfowl grazing pressure throughout the winter on the cover crop fields. We also partner with Canadian Wildlife Service and Ducks Unlimited on wildlife surveys and monitoring of waterfowl and bats. And we also monitor species at risk in the hedgerows and raptors and owls in the grassland set-asides that we support. As well, DFWT has engaged in many academic research partnerships over the years, and we are interested in exploring new and emerging ideas surrounding soil health and on-farm biodiversity.
Great, thank you, April. Last but not least, we have Arzina Hamir, who is a professional agrologist specializing in organic food production. She and her husband run Amara Farm, which is a 25-acre certified organic farm in Courtenay, BC. In addition to her role as manager of programs at Investment Agriculture Foundation and her farm, her extensive community contributions include founding the Mid-Island Farmers Institute and helping set up the Comox Valley Organic Cooperative. She earned her bachelor's degree in crop science from the University of Guelph and her master's degree in sustainable agriculture from the University of London, England.
Thanks so much, Raylani, and greetings from the unceded territory of the Comox people. I'm here today to talk about the BC Living Lab and just to discuss how the Living Lab fits in with some of the information you've heard this morning and the other programs in this session. So for those of you who've not heard the term BC Living Lab or Living Labs, it's actually a framework that Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada has been using for almost a decade as a way of bringing farmers and researchers together to to really innovate. It is a program that is actually farmer-led. So the farmers are the ones that decide what projects and what structure they want on their farms, and they control the process. Even as we heard, much research needs to be multi-year. One of the things with the Living Lab is that in the midst of the project, if a best management practice is not working for the farmer can change that. They are the ones that are actually in control. So in BC, we actually have 2 Living Labs. There is one in the Peace River area, and then we have the BC Living Lab that is based in the lower part of the province. We have a number of partner groups that we work with. IAF is the coordinator, and we work with 9 different commodity groups. The one theme that runs through all of the different groups is cover cropping. So all 9 of the groups are doing some kind of cover cropping experiment, but it also is beyond that as well. So we are already into year 2, the 2 full years of our project. So farmers are already getting ready to plant cover crops. A lot of soil samples are already being taken in 2024. The results of the project are going to be shared within the agricultural community in a number of ways. Often, many of our farmers partner with groups that Alana mentioned earlier to present field days. There will also be fact sheets and reports written. So as a farmer, how do you participate or get to know a little bit more about Living Lab? So primarily that would be done through one of your farmer associations. And the 9 that we are working with are listed on the screen. You can also subscribe to the specific BC Living Lab newsletter where information will go out. As a researcher, we're currently working with 4 institutions as well as Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada researchers. And so reaching out to those institutions, if you're interested in some of the results of the research, you can coordinate with the different researchers at each site. And I think, is that the last one? And if you'd like some more information, the IAF info is in the corner of the screen. You can reach out if you want to learn more. I think one thing I'll just bring up is there is very little primary research being done on cover cropping, or it historically hasn't been done in BC. And I'm really excited to see so much innovation happening in this area across BC and across the different commodity groups. So one of the things that we are noticing within the Living Lab is that farmers are really embracing the idea of being in the driver's seat, trying out some innovative seeding techniques, putting cover crops where you don't normally see them. So within orchards, within wine grape vineyards, trying to figure out how those cover crops are seeded, the timing. All of that is something that is happening within Living Labs. And we hope as the years of data accumulate, we are able to then feed that information, for example, into those crop spreadsheets that Dieter mentioned earlier, into those field days that Alana mentioned, and spread throughout the research community.
Great, thanks, Arzina, and thanks everyone for that introduction to each of your programs and resources. And I see that a few of you have already answered some questions in the Q&A. Thanks for doing that. I think that all of the answered questions should still be available to be viewed by the participants. Everyone keep typing. We have lots of time now to answer some more questions, and I will read a few of these out. We have our first question here is about the relationship between soil drainage and cover cropping, and wondering if there is consideration being given for areas that need soil drainage. In maybe the BMP cost share program would be a good place to answer this. Just if there's any collaboration between getting folks access to drainage that need it so that cover crops can survive or provide those benefits.
Yeah, Raylani, I can probably jump in and answer there. Regarding the BCAF program, no drainage and that sort of cost would not be covered under the BCAF program. However, through the beneficial management practices program, which is also delivered by Investment Agriculture Foundation, improved drainage is covered through the soil carbon BMP category. That would be code 3201. And I was just in the process of typing that and putting a link. So I'll finish answering that one online. So that would be where you would look to get support with improved drainage on your farm.
Great, thanks, Elena. Lots of different cost share programs with a lot of overlapping objectives. So nice to have some of those detailed out. We have a question that reads, as a dry farmer, would irrigation funds be available through BCCAF? As one of our biggest expenses is getting a good stand for the cover crops is trucking in water while we wait for a water license.
Again, with the BCAF program, water management wouldn't be covered. However, under the beneficial management plan, you can first pursue an environmental farm plan and then do a water management plan through the BMP program. And there's also supports available for water infrastructure through that program.
Great. And Arzina, do you have something to add there?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I mean, depending on, where you are in the province and the type of crop that you are trying to establish, this can certainly be a challenge. So for example, in perennial production that uses drip irrigation, the pathways are really difficult to establish in cover crop during the season. So some of the farmers that are in the Living Lab are actually trialing a process called frost seeding. So seeding actually in February, late January, February, and allowing the freeze-thaw cycles to bring the seed down and have it established. It's a time when you can actually get onto the fields, the compaction levels are maybe a little bit less, and it's the hope that once the frost melts, that there's enough soil moisture to establish that cover crop for the upcoming season. So we'll see how well that works this year. It's the first year that we're trialing it, but that's some of the innovation that's happening within Living Lab.
That's a great point. And I know that in other areas of the US, like the Midwest, where they have also like very cold, hard winters, there's a lot of frost seeding information that's come out of there. Dieter, do you know if frost seeding is included in the fact sheets that are coming out for BC?
I think on one or two frosts, it was mentioned that they are can be used for frost seeding. So it's not specifically mentioned now, and the reason is because, as Arzina mentioned, that we have not really this information. We don't want to make things up based on information from somewhere from the eastern provinces or from the Midwest. That's why we try to really limit ourselves to information that we think are solid for BC. And maybe to expand on this a little bit more, one of the purposes of this platform is also to have a tool where we can identify where actually the knowledge gaps are, so that much of the research and work is done for practical reasons in almost always the same area or with the same farmers and or same commodities. And we would like really to expand and go into areas and commodities where that's not yet a part of their management routine, or where there are challenges, right? And we really can then focus programs to exactly those type of questions.
Great. Dieter, while you're here, we do have another question for you in the chat.
Yep.
Someone is wondering, was the cover crop work done under the Canada BC Soil Conservation Program or Green Plan for Agriculture, collected for the cover crop fact sheet series? DF and WT, UBC, MAF, and several producer conservation groups did many on-farm demonstrations and research trials.
Well, actually, the underlying data. So, as you know, Relani, we used everything that has been done or that is somewhere found and somewhere, let's say, vetted for BC. Now, for those specific research trials or results, I'm actually not sure whether that has entered our database. I haven't really seen it explicitly. It might be, let's say, secondary reference in some of those works that have been done. But as I mentioned in the introduction, if there is information, just shovel it over. I mean, I will try to really get that information sorted out. We still have to wrap our mind around how we actually totally organize that, what type of survey we want to do. But I would love to have that conversation and keep those contacts to follow up on it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And as Arzina pointed out also, like a lot of the historical cover crop research hasn't come out of BC or isn't necessarily specific to this region. So there are a lot of gaps in terms of how things perform here or what would be suitable here. And there's a lot of different ways to acquire knowledge, and doing an extensive literature review is definitely one of them. And that was the basis for that project, but experiential knowledge is also really important. So what you as farmers know is, would be great to find a way to include.
And maybe also the way I'm sorry, I see Arzina has their hand up, but just to finish that thought is, I know that in some cover crop tools, they have a lot of, let's say, people around in a room, and every 1 or 2 years, they kind of update those cover crop tools from their experience. And our hope is to actually tap much more into the on-the-ground farmers' experience. Having some anecdotal idea from the Lower Mainland and then extrapolate that to other parts of BC, it might work, it may not work. It's probably better than knowing nothing, but at least then did it actually work out the way? And that's where we need actually to have everybody pulling along string, researchers and farmers, and really making that a powerful tool in the long run, and a living tool, of course.
Arzina, did you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up another potential, I guess, method of cover crop establishment, especially, it looks like it's potentially going to be another dry year. And so timing of when, seed can germinate. We have quite a lot of extensive research that's been done, as Dieter mentioned, in the Lower Mainland on relay cropping, especially for the dairy sector, planting ryegrass within corn stands. We're now going to be looking at trying to do that, use that technique in a drier region in the Okanagan. So if farmers or anybody who's listening is in the Lower Mainland area, there is a fair amount, probably a couple of decades of research of timing and species selection for establishment of ryegrass in the Lower Mainland. But it's going to be really interesting to see how that translates then to a drier region in the interior.
Yeah, that'll be very interesting to see. I know there are a number of challenges when you're trying to manage cover crops, but that timing piece can be so important. Depending on when your cash crop is coming out, it feels sometimes too late to get a cover crop in. So the idea of relay cropping or overlapping that timing seems really promising. Thanks, Arzina. April?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that we're really interested in seeing interseeding and relay cropping of cover crops in Fraser Valley, and that's something we definitely support with our program. And we have a slightly higher cost share rate for cover crops that are seeded before September 1st. And yeah, we'd love to see more relay cropping and have also learned more information.
April, do you want to speak to that timing difference or why it is that you're incentivizing those cover crops to go in earlier rather than later in the Lower Fraser Valley?
Yeah, just so that they get better established. We want, especially in Delta, we have a lot of grazing pressure from waterfowl. And so we really want to get cover crops established as early as they can to grow as big as they can and produce as much biomass as they can. And yeah, I just find there's a lot more success with cover crops that are planted earlier, and also the waterfowl often prefer tender new shoots. So if the crop is bigger, they might be less likely to graze it.
Great. I know there's also a correlation between the amounts of, especially for a cereal, if you plant it before that kind of September cutoff, it has a chance to establish a root system that's much better able to soak up residual nitrogen. So you're much less likely to lose nitrogen to leaching before that date too. So you kind of get that double benefit.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, that really.
Yeah, and maybe one thing I want to add when we talk about challenges, so we have natural challenges, but then there are also challenges, or let's say not challenges, but let's say limitations depending on the system you have. If you are, for example, in a certified organic environment, the germination is a different challenge than what you have in a more conventional farming systems. And then, I mean, April can talk to that for hours, I'm sure. Wildlife pressure is different in some parts. It's a component that maybe in other parts where they have dry water issues, but they maybe not have any, at least not that extent or different wildlife issues. So it's really very complex, and that's why exactly we need to make sure that we just not simply say, well, that's the way it works. We really need to support here and identify those issues and really site-specific, almost surgically address those topics.
Let's see if we have some more Q&A questions here. Alana, I think this question is for you. Will the cost share program be continued in the 2024-25 year? Or is that
yes, for the BCAF program, we are expecting to reopen the program this fiscal, so that would be between April 1st and March 31st of 2024-2025. However, we haven't yet got any dates confirmed that we can share, so we'd recommend you sign up for the e-newsletter, and you'll find out when that intake's opening.
And as just a follow-up to that piece, do you know in any of the funding streams that you've mentioned if there is cost sharing for seeding equipment or for interplanting, relay planting?
Yeah, so under the BCAF program, costs of planting is an eligible cost for cost share, and that would include appropriate seed planting equipment.
Great. Arzina, did you want to add here?
Yeah, I'm just going to pick up on that because, you know, one of the other things I didn't mention that is covered in Living Labs is, apart from the agronomic data that we're trying to collect, we're also looking at the socioeconomic data as well, trying to figure out what are the barriers for adoption and how we can really ensure that, you know, more farmers are cover cropping. And of course, you know, this information around seeding times and seeding equipment, that definitely comes up as one of the barriers. And what's really been interesting to see is that in certain sectors, dairy, for example, we do have third-party contractors who are now stepping up to provide those services for farmers and have a really good understanding of timing and seed rates and specific species information. So we are starting to see a little bit of that as well. And in the wine grape region as well, you need very specialized equipment to be able to seed within the rows. And a contractor has appeared and has some of that experience now. So depending on, you know, your region and your commodity type, there may be some of that expertise already in your community.
That's a great point. Duncan, Dieter, we have a couple of questions that fit in the realm perhaps of the spreadsheet and government publications. One is just a note that someone who's been looking for information on topics is noting that many of the brochures and publications don't have a date on them, making it hard to know how relevant. So maybe a question if the cover crop sheets will be dated, or how that reference information will be available to folks who are using them.
I love that question, because that kind of bugs me too when I have fact sheets and you don't know, is that 20 years old? But I had made sure there is a date on that of every single fact sheet. So yeah, thanks for bringing that one. I try really, as long as I'm still in charge of that, any update has also its date.
Great. And then there's a specific question about suggestions for a late summer cover that can germinate without irrigation. I'm not sure what region you're joining from, but Dieter, do you want to maybe use this question to talk about some of the information that's provided on the fact sheets? Like, is there timing information? And
well, we do have the timing information is not there. What the information we have when it comes to the operational information, other than the environmental information, like soil properties and so on. We have seeding rates, seeding depth, how it can be terminated. The exact timing of whether, well, we have a little bit more vague on that. It can be winter seed, it can be summer, it's a summer annual and so on, but we don't have the exact dates. And again, in this case, if you want to really a recipe for every reason, for every region, no, we don't have that yet, right? I mean, ultimately, yes, that's exactly where we want to go, where you really know where you are, and then you say, this is experience, it's been done already in my area and in this commodity. But we provided all the information we could find for BC, and the exact timing, although it was once in a while mentioned, but it was not, let's say, specific or frequently mentioned enough that we could really say, well, that's pretty sure to say, yeah, do that, right? So the short answer is no, not yet.
yeah, and the without irrigation piece is hard as well, especially for a late summer planting. For those of you who were in the last session, we talked a little bit about summer cover crop that we grew under unirrigated conditions, but we planted those in May. And I didn't say this, but it is true. We irrigated those to germinate them, so that germination piece can be really tricky.
And Relani, you mentioned something that is also a shortcoming of a lot of research that's been done. Many of those research plans, they have been really pampered, right? So they are in areas that have been pampered and watered to make sure that it's a bachelor student, it's a master student, and so on. They make sure that it really grows. But the reality on the ground is often very different. And it's exactly this type of information that is missing. Almost all plants grow when you give them food and water and light. Right? That's all they need. But what if one of those components is missing? And that is often the information that is not really related. And we would also learn from failures, right? And failures are oftentimes not reported. It's almost always the successes. So we are interested also what did not work, right? Not only what worked, right?
And Dieter, can you reiterate where the cover crop sheets will be available once they're finished? And maybe Sean or Asha, do you know if like these will be shared through your networks as well?
So we will create our own web page for the cover crops, and perhaps also have a little bit additional information here, like upcoming events and something like that. But there will be a dedicated web page for cover crops, and we will distribute, we will advertise that through our normal channels, through you, through Living Labs, through Azina, through Alana, through Shauna, through whoever is in our, let's say, address book, right? And also we have also Facebook and those kind of accounts. So it will be advertised as soon as it's live.
Great. Looking forward to seeing those. We have a question about cover cropping in organic systems. So the question reads, how do we ensure that cover cropping management discussions maintain focus on organic practices? The larger regenerative discussions of increasing cover cropping often do not explicitly discuss the use of chemical burn down for termination in conventional systems converting to no-till. Do any of the funding programs deal with this? Yeah, go for it, Alana.
So the BCAF program is open to conventional as well as organic farmers. However, we do have one of the partners that we work with on the program and delivering the producer knowledge transfer is Organic BC. So while those events are open to all producers, that organization is focused on supporting organic practices and producers as well. Regarding the use of the chemical burn down, the cover crops that are established through the BCAF program, it's specifically ineligible to use a termination method, including that termination method for those cover crops.
Arzina?
I'm going to answer this not with my IF hat on, but just as an organic farmer myself. So it's a perennial question, right? Especially if you want a cover crop that grows vigorously in the fall, absorbs all of that nutrients that are left in the soil. But then you want it to die before you have to use that field. So, you know, what some growers do use is that combination of tarping and mowing, like mowing and tarping as a way of terminating, especially if you want to reduce tillage. There's still lots of knowledge gaps there, but that's one option if you want to maintain your organic status and want to reduce tillage, which, you know, is another one of the regenerative practices, but it does require then choosing your cover crop really carefully. Often that's why there's a lot of interest in the oat pea mix, because often it will winter kill. And you don't have to worry about the termination, but if you want something that is alive and growing and absorbing, yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah, I think this is such a good question and really highlights like the systems perspective, where like each one of these practices is wrapped up in every other practice that's happening on the farm. And sometimes it can be very hard to like just unplug one and plug something else in. So having research or information that deals with cover crops in organic systems with the challenges of that system, and then thinking through all of like the outcomes, like if we don't till in the cover crop, you know, how much of those nutrients are ending up in the soil or ultimately become available, because the information we have from that are from tillage systems. So yeah, that's a really good question. All right, we still have like 10 minutes here. So if you have more questions, please type them. You have a whole panel of folks ready to answer. Oh, we do have one. Oh yes, another observation that roller crimpers for termination works pretty well with fall rye and also hairy vetch. And I don't know if there's been a lot of roller crimping research done in this area of the world. I know in the States it has.
Well, AFC has done some roller crimping with mixed success. Yeah, that's well, I know that there is, as a fact, a second roller crimper out there somewhere in BC, or maybe a third, but I know as a fact that AFC has been working with that, and as I said, with a mixed. I'm actually really would like to know from Hans about the success with veg, because I heard also different comments that veg didn't work well with roller crimper. So this is exactly one piece of information. How did he manage to make it work? Or is it maybe that's just an environment? So yeah, would be awesome to chat here.
Yeah, I have heard the same. Vetch just matures at such a variable rate, it can be hard to kill. I have scroll down. Does anyone have any sources for sorghum Sudan grass seed, especially for organic producers? I know this is a up and coming summer cover crop species. So if anyone has answers to that, you can throw that in the chat as well. I don't know if the panelists have any input.
Hans might be a good source of that information, so hopefully he can put that in.
Awesome. I'm curious with the upcoming release of these cover crop fact sheets. Could you detail a bit more, Dieter, about the long-term vision for this information? I know you mentioned the decision tools that are available in some regions of the states. What are you hoping to see come from the information that's collected?
Well, what I hope from the information, I first of all, it was for us, we need to get some momentum and really get something online. And then I would really like to have that interactive conversation and have a repository of those data that can be searchable if you want database in the end, similar actually to what is then developed like the Northeast or the Midwest cover crop tool. However, the underlying information, so basically for those that don't know those tools, there are online tools, you say where you are, and then what your goals are, and then it pops up with a couple of fact sheets. The idea, similar, but what I'd like to see here is much more emphasis of that information being actually collected through those interactive conversations and updated on a regular basis, so that we have the data on that, and so okay, that is for that area that works, and that is the ultimate goal where I would like to see things moving to, right, and where everybody works together and chips in with their information. If I may a little bit digress here, going back to the seeds, that too is an information we like to have. I know that many farmers are sourcing their seeds from suppliers that I've never heard before, and somewhere in the States, even from Europe and so. And there are certainly varieties that are not really, there are different varieties, we know that, and some work well. And is that success of one species actually because the variety is different? We know that sometimes the varietal differences are almost bigger than the species differences. So here, getting those sources and getting some work done here on nailing down really to identify the right varieties would probably also be a big help for growers, and beside the fact that they know where they get the cheapest seed from, right?
Arzina, did you want to add?
Yeah, so one of the things that's coming up, and I think this is a more recent phenomenon, is a lot of growers are actually interested in mixes, in multi-species mixes. So not a single variety, but looking at multiple species for all of the different reasons. And some suppliers are supplying that locally, but as Dieter said, often it's coming in from out of province, and quality, like, so again, another thing that Living Labs is going to be trialing is some of these multi-species mixes that are coming in from elsewhere, seeing what's actually working, what actually germinates. So the nice thing about having researchers and their grad students on these projects is that we're forcing them to actually do some very vigorous data collection. But yeah, I just wanted to point out too, and I guess that's maybe a question to Dieter, is are any of your fact sheets going to be multi-species, or are they individual?
Well, not yet, but there are some almost anecdotal mentioning about is let's say performing well in mixes. No, we don't have. And I know that there are some standard mixes that are almost ready to go, but the different iterations and permutations and combinations, they are basically endless. And I know as a fact, some farmers actually go the way that they kind of spread it out with much more species, and then at the end then figure out how that works. Those survive, those don't survive, and it brings a different layer of complexity. We're happy that we get it now for single species, but will we ever be able to really have every single combination available? Perhaps not, but perhaps at one point the most likely ones with success. Mixes like grass and legumes, that is oftentimes always a good one. But then which legumes and which grasses? We talked about veggies and peas and clovers. They have all different functions and in the ecosystem. So yeah, but ultimately maybe the most frequent and most the ones that have likely success, those will probably publish soon too.
Yeah, that's a great question about the mixes. And I know, Dieter, that in other cover cropping tools, that's exactly how they've addressed that, where it's so hard to just be like, what about this one and this one? And then I throw this one in the mix. Instead, they've gone like for standard mixes where it's like, 60% oats and 40% peas, and then they can give you kind of independent information for that. But yeah, there's like a balancing to be done between the management complexity that comes with a mix of cover crops in terms of planting and terminating and managing it, and then also potentially all of the benefits from that biodiversity that comes from a mix of cover crops.
And in that spirit, there's only so much that can be given in recipes, right? But the last 100 or the last stretch needs to be done by the grower themselves for their farm, right? And then for their needs and for the history of their farm and their management and for their labor requirements. So really providing factories for every single possible combination, that's almost impossible. But if we can kind of provide a very solid first idea, then that would be already help. And then the rest could perhaps be with support of living labs and so done by try and error, right? But I think we can reduce that try and error by already giving a really solid idea what will definitely work and what will definitely not work, and then kind of filling out the fine tuning needs still to be done on the farm itself. So it would probably be an illusion to think that we can provide an answer to everything.
Absolutely. And I see we have a great concluding question, a very forward-looking question to end the panel today. And I think maybe Arzina and April, this might be a good question for both of your programs. But the question reads, is any of the research forward-looking towards cover crops suited to the expected climates in 20 to 30 years?
I guess I'll try that first. I don't think there is a specific push to look at climate within 20 to 30 years, but having research happen in different ecozones across BC, I think gives us an idea of, for example, as Vancouver Island becomes a bit more of a Mediterranean climate, that we start to look to the interior as in some of the practices that have been more established there in terms of timing and species that do well in those dry climatic regions. Similarly, like as we start to see more heavy, intense rain events that are happening through the winter months, the establishment of a good thick stand that will withstand the leaching capacity that our rain events in our atmospheric rivers have will also be, it'll be tested in real time. But I'm not sure how that's just another layer of complexity of having to look climate forward. But we're already living in climate change. So I think the research that's happening right now is at least able to inform, and especially if we ask those questions, if we are looking at stand density through the winter months, we are looking at establishment in dry soils, that will help inform us or a more climate forward time.
And I think it's also a good question in regards that we cannot be complacent and think, well, once we acquired the research, well, we go home and that's it. We will need to learn. We need, of course, we have some educated guess how things may change and do those recommendations based on that, what perhaps will change. But still, there are variables that change, factors that will change. But there are legislation may change, and you know, societal requirements may change. So there are many factors, and but I think the message here is we need to be on our toes and really keep on learning, and not expecting that that knowledge is static knowledge. It will be dynamic, and we need to account for that in our research as well.
Absolutely. That's a very great point to end it on right here. The hour flew by. So huge thanks to all the panelists who are here and everyone who took the time to listen and to ask questions.